Welcome to another episode of Web3 Disruptors. I am thrilled today to welcome our latest guest, Min Wei. She is the Global Head of Ecosystem Growth at Algorand Foundation. She's responsible for building partnerships, attracting and supporting Web3 verticals, and scaling community activations. Prior to her role, she led partnerships at blockchain.com, and she also co-founded a venture-backed startup that built consumer-facing apps and was the COO. Thank you so much for joining us, Min. We are delighted to have you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so as a starting point, it'd be wonderful to just understand a little bit about your journey into Web3 and how you got here.
Of course. Yeah. So my journey, tech has kind of always been in my DNA. I started my career sort of developing software, and then I dabbled a little bit in tech and media. And as you mentioned, in 2016, I, started a company with a couple of co-founders. Um, and that was actually my journey into Web3. Initially we were at this co-working space that had just companies building, Origin protocol was launching on a desk, like 5 desks away, all these other, like this ICO, this quantum based ICO crypto started on the other side of the room. Just like all this frenzy around Web3. And we ended up, actually, the company got acquired by blockchain.com, which is my official journey into crypto. And I've, never looked back since.
Amazing. And so tell us about your current role at Algorand Foundation.
Yeah, so right now, I lead ecosystem growth at the foundation. And what this really means is getting applications, getting developers, and getting users into our ecosystem. We look at our community, figuring out ways to activate the community around Algorand. We look at specific verticals, so Web3, DeFi, impact, etc. Look for entrepreneurs, look for developers that really want to build solutions in those verticals and help them be successful. We look at ways in which we could partner with other ecosystems and other tools and platforms to build out our ecosystem. And then, of course, we make strategic decisions. For example, in India, we made a strategic decision to go deep in India and really build our ecosystem from the ground up. So it's really very much about what can we do to help grow this ecosystem around this amazing tech that Algorand has built.
Perfect. And let's talk about the tech then so that we can contextualize those things. So what does Algorand do? What problem are you solving?
Yeah, so Algorand is a layer 1 blockchain. It was founded by, a Turing winning professor at MIT, Sylvia Macaulay. It is a proof of stake consensus mechanism, but it's a pure proof of stake consensus, which is all about prioritizing security. So, you actually don't have to have, in most proof of stake consensus mechanisms, it's the amount of the asset that you have that determines whether or not you get selected to validate a block. On Algorand, it's randomly, we call it a verifiably random selection of which node and which node gets to validate a block. So that makes it incredibly secure. It is also incredibly fast. There's over 7,000 transactions per second that we process. And the very unique thing about Algorand is the finality that it has. So again, on most blockchains, you have to wait, for a certain number of blocks to confirm a transaction in order for that to be considered a complete transaction. On Algorand, once a block is confirmed, it is final, and it's a 3.3 second finality, which matters a lot in enterprise grade solutions and applications. So that is like a very unique thing that that Algorand provides as a platform.
And just for people that are less familiar with the technical side of things, when you talk about the speed and the how fast it is, and then you also mentioned that the finality is really important. Why is that?
Yeah. So it's almost like if you think about when you sign up on a website, right? You put in your name, you put in a password, and we've been trained over the past 20 years to, since the whole, internet, .com days, we've been trained that we expect the website to come back immediately and log you in.
Hmm.
That is, on the back. There's so much transaction that's happening. There's confirmation, there's checking of your data credentials, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason why it's important in a blockchain Web3 application for it to be fast is it's like the user experience, right? Like we expect this to happen. And that's like how fast it is. But the finality is really important because it's almost like it's a certainty that something is true or not. It's
Hmm.
almost a little
Okay.
bit of a binary decision, right? Is it true? Is it min or is it not min? And you can't like be 60% sure that it's min, right? You have to be 100% sure that's min. And so that's why the 3.3 second finality matters so much in some of these really important applications like, settlement, pay for
Hmm.
payments and,
Hmm.
identity and all that stuff. So that's the reason why those two unique aspects about the blockchain really kind of shines
Hmm.
in in our world.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And so you've obviously had this incredible career and a lot of variance to it. When you made the decision to join the Algorand team, what was it about what the organization and what the team are doing that sort of captured your imagination and sort of made you feel that this was something that you wanted to be a part of?
Yeah, I there are a couple things that I learned when I was doing my own startup that really kind of I think plays uh, throughout decisions I've made since then. One is, you know, for anything that you do, if the tech is good, then your job is just about figuring out how to make it better.
Hmm.
And for me, when I was at blockchain.com, I came across Algorand as a layer one and as an ecosystem at the time. And every single person that has worked with Algorand in supporting it and our platform just talks about how the tech is so great, so easy, and so solid. So I think fundamentally, I think that part of Algorand ecosystem really attracted me. The other thing that really kind of plays through for me is I just really enjoyed meeting the people. When I first met Stacy, our CEO, I just really appreciated her her vision, just
Hmm.
like the clarity of her vision, but also just her openness of sort of being able of wanting to try things
Hmm.
that she hasn't tried before and being open to kind of new ways of trying these different things. I just really appreciated that approach. So I think,
Hmm.
and if there's one thing I've learned in doing my own startup, it's all about the people. The
Hmm.
people just makes or breaks it. And, you want to be with the right people, and that's the reason why, this opportunity really meant a lot to me.
Hmm. Let's talk about your startup life because there's a lot of, kind of founders potentially or aspiring founders that
Yeah.
may well want to sort of take that same path. What was that journey like for you, and what did you really learn through that process?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess my first my first advice to anybody who is even thinking about doing it is if you're thinking about it, that means you should do it.
Okay.
If there is if you have that bug, it's you gotta go for it. And because one of the biggest lessons I've learned from starting my startup is you got to be in it to win it, right? If you don't try, you won't know. You will just never know. And so, my personal journey into it was a fairly, it was almost like too easy. I met my two co-founders. They were just a brilliant technologist, a brilliant product person, and I just really liked hanging out with them. So it was an easy decision for me to say, let's do this. Um, but but I've learned so much, even though, I've learned so much just being with them and working with them. I've spent 15 years in New York and have this attitude of, or I used to have this attitude of like, well, if it's something everybody wants, it's not, I mean, that's maybe not that special. I don't know if I want it. But what I've learned in doing my own startup is like, if you're trying to build a consumer product, the goal is to get the mass to like it, right? So you have to know what everybody else likes. And the only way for me to know about it is to try it. And so, that like really got every single time I'm trying to figure out a new user acquisition method or a new partnership that we should do to grow our product, I keep reminding myself it's about trying things, and you have to just like give it a try, and then you'll know whether or not it works or not. So I think that is like the number one thing, and I think that plays through. If you're thinking about it, you got to try it. You just have to. I mean, of course, be thoughtful about your decisions, right? But you have to try it because otherwise you won't know. And then I think the other main thing that I've learned from doing my own startup, which I think applies, again, I sort of take with me throughout, is it's all about knowing your superpower and then knowing what you're not good at, and just being very sort of honest about it and then embrace it, right? Like, and so, it's like, for me, it was a big moment of introspection, during and after the startup, just kind of figuring out what works for me and what didn't, and, how to move forward. And so that experience is so valuable for me. And that's why I also just, if for anybody who is interested in a startup, I think just the personal learnings that you gain from it is so valuable.
I'd echo that as well. The piece that you described around understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at really, really resonates for me. Also as someone who's founded a couple of businesses, like you can't then build a team of people who are really similar to you. You actually have to build a team that is about complementary skill sets, because with that self-knowledge, you say, I know I'm not going to be good at this, so therefore I really, really need to make sure that this person is good at it, and so the chemistry that you described with your two partners is so important. But I also think that self-knowledge piece and the sort of subsequent hiring in that vein starts to be really important as well.
100%. And I'll just even give you an example, right? Like, it's the um before the startup, I was working at bigger companies with like tens of thousands of people. Decisions were like consensus driven decisions, right? And I come to a startup of 3 people. My co-founder, Fred, is the CTO. He builds the tech. Tian is the, CEO and product guy. He kind of helps us prioritize the product decisions, and I'm running all the business and other stuff. Decisions just have to be made. And so, like, my first month, I was like, hey guys, what do you think about this tool for HR and that tool for product? And I realized, like, that is not a decision I need to ask them about. That's a decision I need to be making. And but just being decisive and being fast to make those decisions matters so much when you're a 3-person organization
Yeah.
versus, right, like a 50,000 person organization. And I will take that away with me, like, no matter where I go, because and now I remind myself I need to be decisive and I need to be quick on these decisions. And I need, and I can recognize it when I need to be, that for my team. So I think it's all about, to your point, it's all about complementing your skill sets with the rest of your team and being very aware of, what needs to be done in those circumstances.
Yeah, and not everybody can do both of these environments. That's the other thing, is the assumption is we work for a startup, work for this big structured corporate, and it's just adapting. What when
Yeah.
I look at this from a view of talent, I see that there are a subset of people that are capable of doing that. And then there are some people who are amazing at startups and they take it to a certain point, and then it's time for them to go off and chase something new. And then the same thing with people in a corporate environment where they're big company people, and that's really their bag, and what they bring to the party. It's really not as common as people think that you can flow within both of those environments. So it's kind of another piece, I think, of, again, knowing yourself, or definitely knowing how you're going to need to sort of adapt, because the resources that you get in a large organization versus a startup, it's worlds apart.
And this is why, like, self-awareness, like this constant introspection and constant awareness
Mm-hmm.
of your role within the organization, your role within the team, and your role within what you're trying to achieve. I think it's so important, and I think not talked about enough.
Yeah. So what was the app that you built?
Well, so it was a consumer facing app. And at the
Mhm.
time, we actually went through a couple different iterations. Initially, it was really about building a network that is a more private and smaller network. It was at the time sort of like recognizing that Facebook was really big, but wasn't getting the real engagement that you wanted. Instagram was nice. And then there was like Snapchat that was all about private and, like, disappearing messages. So we wanted to kind of bring together an app that really helped, like, sort of a true network of friends or family. But that was really hard. It was really hard to kind of find the right traction. And then we pivoted a little bit towards sharing of sort of private moments, like with family.
Mhm.
It's like, I'm on my way here and when I'm going to be there, kind of just helping, almost like a mix of a communication
Mhm.
and a social network app. But again, there it was really hard because the competition around, like, uh, like 360 Life 360
Mhm. Okay.
was just coming online at the time, and so we had faced a lot of and Zenly was another app that got acquired by Snapchat. So it was like, it felt like we had a good idea, a good seed
Mhm.
of an idea, but like any other consumer startups, the timing, and
Totally.
it's
Timing's
it's,
everything.
it's
Yeah.
everything,
Mhm.
everything. Yeah,
But
but
I
again,
think
it's
the
like,
journey and the learns and things like that are also just so invaluable, as you kind of mentioned.
yeah, it's so I still think back to those days, and I'm like, oh yeah, this
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
So we talked, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, actually. Going into and being involved around partnerships and just the
yeah,
growth of the ecosystem is
yeah.
an exciting and really interesting space to be in. It's not widely known, I think, how to get yourself into that arena, right? How to get involved in and to orient your career into partnerships, into ecosystem growth. And I can say this firsthand in speaking to people in the space on the talent side. I get asked this question a lot. So I'd love your perspective around how would you frame the parameters of that role, and how do people put themselves in a position to be in that role?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a tricky one, right? So, what does partnerships mean, right? What does it mean when somebody is doing partnerships? So, to me, it's kind of you're trying to grow a business or trying to grow a product by working with external parties. That is both very specific and very vague at the same time,
Yeah.
right? Specific because it's all about external parties. It's like that line is drawn, but vague because growing a business and growing a product, that could mean anything. And so I think the way I typically ground the thinking around this is like, uh, there are a couple different ways in which you could grow a business or a product, right? It's either revenue or user acquisition slash distribution, or you're trying to grow a product or a platform.
Hmm.
So, the reason why that's important is, the way you would build partnerships for those three different types of quote unquote growth is very different. Like a revenue partnership requires you to, find a third party to work with that you have new um, profit or new, money revenue coming in. You have to do a revenue shares like e-commerce on a platform, get together a bunch of, I'm thinking back to my media days, like, a blog network where you can do rev share with the bloggers, right? A distribution or user acquisition type partnership is much more about like thinking big, like mobile pre-installs on mobile phones, or like big traffic referrals, or how do you partner with Walmart, um, but that's a whole different set of value exchange that you need to think about when you're talking about distribution and user acquisition. Like, what did they get? What do you get, right? And then actually, what I tend to like quite a bit, and I think it is a lot of times underplayed, is the product and platform partnerships. You know, I worked at WordPress.com, which is sort of it's an enterprise hosting service for WordPress. And at the time, we wanted to build out the ecosystem of apps and service providers that are building on WordPress at the time. And so it's about, it's about attracting developers. And so this kind of is a little bit relevant to my current job, right? It's about attracting developers that want to build, and then helping them find the right way to integrate their product into your ecosystem. It's
Hmm.
about finding services that make sense for other people that are looking to build. It's like, I love it because it's all about growing together.
Hmm.
And that's, another type of, partnerships as well. So yeah, I mean, to your point, it's so, and even just as I'm talking through it, they're all so different. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is why partnerships, I think, just really depends on the company. It really depends on what you are trying to achieve. And I think taking it back to your kind of initial question of like, how does one get into it? I think it's really just, I feel like there's no real like clear path into it.
Hmm.
Um, it's more a mindset, if you will,
Hmm.
of like how to think about growing a business and a product, and taking the angle of like being creative and reaching out to, you know, what you think are tangential businesses and
Hmm.
tangential ideas to then find ways to work together to grow.
Hmm. Where do you see, so if you were to look at peers that are doing kind of similar roles, where do you see people coming from? So what sorts of roles do they transition from in to sort of navigate into partnerships?
Yep. Yep. Um, so I typically see a couple of um, different connections in. One is like a strategy role is, if are is they're pretty common, to move from strategy into a biz dev or a partnerships type role. Somebody who's thinking about the high levels and then want to get a little bit more uh, sort of into the weeds and
Yeah.
execution. I think that's how I would think about that. I mean, of course, there's also an element of sales
Hmm.
that is a part of BD and partnerships. So I think that's a very easy transition as well. It's almost like strategic sales in some cases,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Depending on the organization. But then I also see in some cases like marketing, right? Like marketing is all about growing the user base and user acquisition in the funnel.
Hmm.
Um, so I could also see uh, a slice of, if you're thinking about optimizing a funnel, optimizing user acquisition, what are ways in which you can partner with others to do so, right? That's another way sort of thinking about it. Um, and then of course, product, is this sort of new, I mean, not so new anymore, but it still feels new in
Hmm.
terms of a function that is that cuts across a lot of different disciplines. So I've also seen folks that have worked in product that have very good partnership sense and very good BD sense, because it's really about aligning your goals with,
Hmm.
and then figuring out how to achieve them. So, you know, I've definitely seen marketing and product kind of come into the fold. But, the traditional paths, I would say, are
Hmm.
more strategy and
Yeah.
sales. Have you
Great.
seen, I mean, you've seen this quite a bit. Like, what have you seen in terms of folks that kind of come into partnerships, BD, and
Yeah,
that
I think
function?
you've defined it really well in that it is you're essentially looking for a mindset and you're looking for almost transferable skills. So
Yeah.
probably the most common that where I sort of see people making the transition is they're in some sort of business development role already, but maybe at a more sort of strategic level, and or focused on sort of growth goals for the organization, which just looking at partnerships is just another another avenue, like a
Yeah.
different sort of perspective. That's where I
Yeah.
would say I've seen maybe 70, 70, 80% of people make the transition. But I also think
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting topic because there's other people that maybe don't realize that they could make that leap, or that they do have that skill set because they're not coming from a traditional business development background or strategy. But I think what you did was kind of connected the dots around other avenues that provide really kind of a route into the space, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah. And I will say then, like, if you think about, Web3 and blockchain, that's a whole layer of like new complexity,
Hmm.
into
Yeah.
thinking about partnerships. And, I'm just sort of thinking about my role, like the way I think about sort of growing the ecosystem for the foundation, because we got to look across the entire ecosystem versus the way I would think about partnerships as a protocol within our ecosystem. Even
Hmm.
that is different, right? So like yeah, it is very nuanced. But I'd say the thing for me that ties it all together, to your point, is just like understanding what the goals are that you want to achieve, and then just being creative and figuring out ways to achieve it right through them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's really
So you mentioned the extra layer of complexity with Web3. If we take it to zoom out, take it to Web3, one of the things that I think we can all agree is this is a space that it moves so incredibly fast, faster than any space that I've been involved in, and it's really difficult sometimes for people to keep up with the pace of change. Well, what are your predictions? Where do you see things going for Web3? What do you think the next 12 months is going to look like?
I mean, I don't think it's gonna slow down.
Hmm.
If anything, it's gonna just keep moving at that crazy pace. And to be honest, that's what I love about it, Um, and I'd say uh I think it's just gonna we're gonna keep getting, or I know I'm gonna keep being surprised and impressed by the types of projects that are gonna come out of Web3. And I can speak to just what I'm seeing in Algorand a little bit more to kind of share what I mean. Like, I joined the foundation in November,
Hmm.
and before November, I didn't know about some of the projects that are in our ecosystem, and just knowing about what people are building just is mind blowing. So, Travel X, one of my favorite projects, is called Travel X, which is they have gone out and tokenized uh, airline tickets into NFTs. And they've partnered with an airline called Flybondi that is based in Argentina, and they're building partnerships with other airlines globally as well. But just this one example is that they've, Flybondi now, when you buy a ticket on Flybondi, it is actually an NFT that is minted on Algorand. And what that means is you can change your name, you can send this NFT to somebody else, you can even sell it in a secondary market. And I think it's one of these products and ideas that makes so much sense you're like, as a consumer, as a traveler, you're like, of course, why don't I own my ticket? Like, why
Hmm.
can't I,
Exactly.
be the holder of my own ticket that I've purchased,
Hmm.
And it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. It's like it's a they're just pushing the boundaries, and they've completely turned an industry on its head. And I love that. And I think we're going to see more and more of these sort of like, you know, innovations come through using the technology, but using the fundamental aspects of the technology, like the ownership piece, the transparency piece, using those to flip an industry and flip the sort of business models um, for for these traditional companies. And I just love that. I think we're going to see more of these. We have another company called Lofty that is doing tokenization of residential um, rental markets. So you could you could be a fractional owner of a rental property and earn rental income through it, but you can do it in a very transparent and quick and simple way. You can do it. You can do it by just paying $50. You don't have to like own
Yeah.
6-figure number assets in order to do this. Like these types of things, I think just really showcase the power of Web3. And I think, I'm excited about seeing more and more of these types of ideas and products out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk about the specific use cases, I think it's those things for people who are not native to the space where
Yeah.
they listen to it and think, oh, I get it now. Like I really understand how this could be quite transformative for me as a user, and sort of see the promise that the technology gives around sort of bringing back the point of power and choice to the user. And from a some of the examples that you kind of just talked about, do you see very much around loyalty and kind of reward within some of these different kind of projects? Because that to me is also, as you think about the customer journey, starts
Yeah.
to be quite exciting for brands to get really sticky with their consumers, and also for me as a consumer to feel that I'm getting something back, right, from kind of participating and being loyal to to whatever the brand is, to the airline or whoever it is.
Yes. Yes. So we are seeing a lot of interest, right, from
Hmm.
brands to think about tapping into, blockchain to drive rewards and loyalty. And um, I think it's a really big opportunity, but one that we have not yet fully fleshed out. By
Hmm.
we, I mean collectively,
Yep.
because I think we're just scratching the surfaces when we're saying, oh, let's launch a rewards program on a blockchain so that, we can reward users for buying, 5 drinks or whatever it
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
I think that is for sure a good way to do it, but it doesn't fundamentally change the way that consumers
Hmm.
behave,
Hmm.
right? We're still thinking about it in okay, I'm a customer and I want to be rewarded for my loyalty to this brand. It
Hmm.
doesn't change the dynamic. And what I think is kind of fascinating about what Web3 can do is it like flips business models. It flips thinking. So like in that travel example, it's actually not about it's not about how a traveler should be treated by the airline. It is
Hmm.
about the fact that I now own my ticket and I can do what I choose to do. And I now have the power and the control, right? And so I think to me, that's the more powerful thing. And then with that, you will have loyalty
Hmm.
programs and rewards
Hmm.
programs, and right, like
Hmm.
so it's almost like you're building a different bubble out here, and
Hmm.
I think that's what's really exciting. But the rewards piece is a very important one for a lot of Web2 brands, and I think this is where a lot of a lot of the interactions between Web2 and Web3 currently is taking place, I
Hmm.
think it's going to go deeper than that. I think
Yeah.
that is just like the very first step, and we're going to get so much more sophisticated and
Yeah.
mature about the ways to truly leverage Web3 for what it's for, you know?
Hmm. I mean, I think about fan engagement, for example. Imagine having bought a Taylor Swift ticket way before she was famous, but it was an NFT, and now forevermore I have, I get access to her tickets first. I'm not actually a Taylor Swift fan, to be fair, but it
My
would be
daughter is, so
for
I
all
get
the
it.
yeah, for all the people that spent $1,000 on a ticket, to be one of those early supporters and to feel that you get preferential treatment. I think those are kind of the things that feel quite exciting from a fan perspective, and also for them, to the artists as well, to kind of connect on a different level. So
Totally. You just reminded me. I was advising this group of students out of UPenn building a fan token platform for student athletes, right? And the idea is really like kind of this idea of like you invest in their future, right?
hmm.
And then by being in early into recognizing some of these student athletes when they're still students before they become professional athletes, just it's not just flexing that you've, that you were there, but also just like, being part of that journey. And, if they're, um, if they're successful, the value of their token goes up, right?
Hmm.
Like there's an element
Exactly.
of investment. It's
Hmm.
just like a very interesting, that's what I love. Like this interest, this like changing how you think
Hmm.
about,
Yeah.
about about a business, about an idea. I think that's what I think Web3 is all about. And,
Yeah, and I
you just
think
like,
once you
you
get
can
into
even,
that mindset,
yeah,
you can't stop.
can't stop. Yes, you can't. And that's why I'm like, I don't know where it's gonna go. Like it could go anywhere because I feel like I'm certainly not smart enough to even predict, but I can certainly appreciate just
Hmm.
how
Yeah.
like just world like life changing some of the stuff can really be.
Yeah, completely. Well, listen, I can't even believe that we're almost at time. It's been fantastic. Tell us, before I let you go, what's kind of next for Algorand. What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I more stuff, more of these, like, just you can't believe we haven't thought about this, and why don't we have this ideas come out of Algorand. I think the idea of real world assets on chain and how that could really change and improve people's lives. So we're really working, impact vertical is something that we've dedicated a lot of resources and time and into, and there's a lot of exciting projects like digital identifications,
Yeah,
right?
huge.
Ways in which huge. So I think that's a vertical that I'm super excited about. As I mentioned, real world asset is another sort of fantastic use case that we're going to be sort of focused on as well at the foundation. And I think we're just we want to just keep supporting projects that are just doing exciting things. We have projects like Goracle, which is a decentralized oracle that really showcases our technology. I think those are projects that really get us excited. So our goal is really to be here for the projects that are building on Algorand, give them all the support that we can, and help them be successful. Because if they're successful, we're successful, and I think we sort of collectively all benefit. And so I'm, just very grateful for all the folks in our ecosystem and everybody who's building these amazing products for
Mhm.
us.
Sounds great. And so, if people want to follow along and hear more from you, Min, what's the best channel to follow you?
Um, Yeah, well, Twitter. Now that we're in Web3, we have to use Twitter. So,
Yes.
Min TWT. So I am on Twitter. But also please follow the Algorand Foundation Twitter as well.
Mhm.
We share most of our news and highlights of our projects on that handle, and that's the best way to get familiar with the projects and familiar with the ecosystem.
Brilliant. Okay, great. We'll also include that in the show notes so we can make it really easy for people to find you. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been so fantastic to kind of hear your perspective and some of your insights, and we'll be avidly following for updates on what's next for Algorand. But thank you for sharing so generously with our listeners today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. And to our listeners, we'll see you next week for another episode of Web3 Disruptors.